Thank you very much for coming out on this beautiful night tonight to hear about the proposed ballot question on the November 5th ballot in Townsend, Massachusetts, to try to put the Community Preservation Act into effect in Townsend. So this is actually going to be one of the most important things I'll be talking about tonight, is the fact that this is question 6. Which means you have to plow through 5 state ballot questions, all of which are extremely wordy, before you finally get to our Community Preservation Act. So make sure you keep turning those pages on your ballot when you get there. I will start off here with the agenda. Our meeting tonight is actually sponsored by 3 town groups: the Townsend Affordable Housing Trust, the Recreation Commission, and the Conservation Commission. Just to give you a brief overview of who's on the stage, and I'm going to ask Brian to introduce himself also. I am Bill Rideout. I'm a Townsend resident. I have been working many years on the rail trail, and I am the treasurer of Squannacook Greenways, which is the nonprofit that has built the rail trail to the date, what exists of it. And I'm also the treasurer of the Townsend Historical Society, and I'm a member of the committee for the Townsend Community Preservation Act. Very, very clever name. But I will let the rest of my panelists introduce themselves up here on the stage.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. I'm nice to meet you all. I'm Brian Goldberg. I'm from Shirley, and a little over a year ago, Allison and I were sitting here in Shirley trying to advocate for passing the Community Preservation Act. So we have a lot of experience from what it's like to try to get it over the finish line, and we've been really pleased, and we'll talk more about that.
I'm Allison Tachi, also born and raised in Shirley, and Brian pretty much summed it up. We met and we decided to attack this problem, and I'm happy to say it was very successful, but not easy.
And good evening, I'm Kim Craven, longtime Townsend resident, and I'm involved with several different committees: Townsend Ecumenical Outreach, which is our food pantry and clothes closet, and we help folks with their daily living, heating bills, rental assistance, things of that nature. I'm on some of the subcommittees for Townsend Historic Society with the redevelopment into Old Harbor Village. I am working with the Townsend Business Association as part of the Small Towns Initiatives, which is the 6 communities in the 1st Middlesex District, and we've been meeting with state officials, whether it be from the Office of Tourism or Agriculture, and trying to get them to understand the needs of our communities. And I'm very hopeful that folks will open their minds to the possibilities of what can happen for our community with the Community Preservation Act.
Thanks, Kim. Just a brief overview. I'm going to be doing a presentation, an overview of the Community Preservation Act, and in particular, what we're asking for in Townsend. It's about 25 slides. My wife listened to it last night. It took 23 minutes, and she managed not to fall asleep, so hopefully I'll be able to pull that off again. Then Allison and Brian will just give a brief overview of their experiences with the CPA, and then we're going to open up the meeting to questions and answers. And Kim is also a member of the committee for the Townsend Preservation Act, so she'll be up here on the stage helping me out answer questions, as will Brian and Allison. All right, so I'm going to give the elevator pitch, which is, what if somebody asks you, why are you doing all this trouble with this Community Preservation Act, and you've only got 2 minutes before the elevator gets to the top floor? So this is my personal view. I will be going over all these points in much greater detail, but this is the 2-minute overview of why we're pushing the Community Preservation Act. So It helps preserve a lot of the things that we love about Townsend. Townsend has just beautiful open space and trails, including the rail trail that we've been working on for many, many years. Recreation and youth sports is a really nice place to raise families. It has tremendous historic buildings that we really feel are jewels, and we really want to make it affordable housing to allow people to live in our town. Near and dear to my heart, it will allow the rail trail that has presently comes to the center of town here to continue over that trestle, at least we hope it will, into West Townsend, allowing us to use the Mass Trails grant. And the Mass Trails grant only requires a 20% match on our side. To date, we've been using it. We've been getting that 20% match by selling bricks and me chasing after people in town. But it'd be really nice to be able to continue that much quicker and easier. It is a surcharge on your property tax, so that is the con. But two very important things. If you make less than 80K, and that's not a precise number, I'll show you the precise numbers in a minute, you can opt out no matter what your age is. If you're over 60 and you make less than 100K, and that number is actually a little lower than the real cutoff, you can opt out. So this is an important difference between this and an override. Overrides, everybody has to pay no matter what your income is. The Community Preservation Act, the way we have proposed it, you can opt out if it's a burden to you. If you don't opt out, it's typically less than a 1% increase, $40 to $85 per year. The other point is the state typically matches 15 to 35%. It comes from the housing market, so it depends on how lively the housing market is. So far, the state has given out hundreds of millions of dollars over the 20 years or so the program's been in existence, and they've gone to the CPA towns that have gone to the towns in Massachusetts past the CPA. So far, Townsend, of those hundreds of millions of dollars, has not yet received a dime. So it's another issue that we hope to get our fair share in Townsend. All right, so that was my elevator pitch. I'm going to go into more details. I'll try not to fall asleep, but we'll go over here. So just a general overview, it's a smart growth tool that helps communities preserve open space and historic sites, create affordable housing, and develop outdoor recreation facilities. So when you propose CPA in a given town, you actually have a bunch of options. So I'm going to go over the options that we chose, and in fact, they are exactly the same options that Shirley chose, and they're exactly the same options that Pepperell passed 2 years ago. So the property tax, the percent, the surcharge, you can go up to 3%. We chose just the 1%. You can either have a low-income exemption, which I just talked about, or not. You have the choice of having that or not. We decided, yes, we do not want to be a burden on the less, people who are having lower incomes in town, so we chose to include the low-income exemption. The first $100,000 of your property value is excluded, so that 1% doesn't apply to your whole house, it applies only to anything above $100,000. So this is a very important point. So once people might say, oh, well, once they get 1%, they're going to raise it up to 3%. You cannot change these options unless you go all the way back and do a ballot question again. So the fact is, there's no way to get rid of that low-income exemption without going all the way to the ballot and getting that passed. There's no way to get rid of the raise the property tax from surcharge from 1% to anything higher without another ballot vote. So it is it's not a slippery slope. It's very hard to get these things passed, and it's very hard to change them. So let me go over the low-income exemption, because I think it's a very important part of this whole deal. So there is a table that I have on my website, and I'm going to demonstrate that website in a second, that tells you the exact number. Depends on whether you're over 60 or under 60, and depends on how many people are in your household. For right now, for a single person, it's actually, I said it was 80, but it's actually 83, 384, and it goes up each year with inflation. If you're over 60, the number is actually 104,000. And again, that's for a single person. It's higher if you have dependents. But But it does, to be honest, it does require a visit to the town assessor's office each year. You have to fill out the form in order to get it. And it's not, you do it once, you have to do it each year. So that is something to consider. But then at that point, if you're under that thing and you fill out the form, you pay 0 for the CPA tax. But one of the points I think is very important is I was looking on the town website, and there are a lot of different programs to help people who are struggling with their property taxes. If the CPA passes, that'll just be one of them. So I really recommend that people who are burdened by property taxes shouldn't just be going to the town assessor's office to get their CPA exemption. There's lots of other things they can do and lots of other programs, and I was quite surprised at how many there are. So I would really say, is it a burden? I would think that it should be something you should do if you're really having trouble with your property taxes. All right, so that was the low income exemption. Now I'm going to talk about, well, what if you end up paying the tax? What will it cost me? So roughly $400,000 house is about $43 per year. A $700,000 house, one of the higher ones in towns and larger, is $86 per year. For math nerds, here's the equation you can plug in. In fact, I'll be showing you that it's on my website. Here's the example with the numbers showing for a $400,000 house, it's $43 per year. And I actually had a suggestion. Let me get back to this. All right, Tim, you want to give? I've got all these. Okay. I thought I had this here. Google Chrome. Nope, I lost it. Calling in the technical experts here. I am not a Windows person. Townsend CPA. It wouldn't be a presentation without at least one computer glitch. So. We can look at the Stratford Police Department if you want, but yes. CPA. All right, so very simple URL to remember. It's townshendcpa.org. This is our little website here. It has a lot of the information that's in this talk. I will be linking this talk on this web page, the slides, and I will also be linking the YouTube video once my friend Dave has it up and ready for us. But if you scroll down here, you'll see one of the things is I have a link to the exact numbers. The exact numbers actually change each year, so I'm pointing you to this communitypreservation.org site where they will update the link every year. So if you followed this, you would see the link that gives you the exact numbers. And it changes every year, so I cannot, put down a hard-coded link there. But I was also said, people might say, well, I want to put in my exact value of my house. So here we have 400,000, let's change it to a $500,000 house. And you can see the calculator will immediately give you what the CPA cost per year is at the present tax rate in Townsend, which is $14.41 per thousand, at least the last one I could find. So when a new tax rate is updated in Townsend, I can at least change that default value so that people can use this calculator always to figure out pretty much exactly what it would cost them. And now I'm going to switch back to PowerPoint and hopefully get back. And then slideshow begin from current slide. Okay, thank you. Thank you, technical assistant. All right. enough about math. All right, so I just went over the townsendcpa.org website. So now I'm going to walk you through what happens if it passes. Obviously, what happens if it doesn't pass is nothing. So let's talk about what happens if it does pass. So these are all state rules. It's not something that Townsend is deciding. You set up a community preservation committee, and the way you do that is you need a town meeting to set up a bylaw for how this happens. But the bylaw has restrictions on it, and the bylaw restriction will have to be that the board will have between 5 and 9 members. There are 5 members that are required from other boards: the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, the Historic District Commission, or if you actually had a historic commission, that would be there too, but we don't have one. The Housing Authority, and Parks and Cemetery. And then you can have up to 4 at-large members according to the bylaw that the town passes. That group then, and this is something that surely people probably know, then have to develop a community preservation plan, which hopefully ties into some of the other documents in town, like the open space and the master plan. And then once they have a community preservation committee, they take applications for spending that CPA money. And this is also at a very important point. It is not just the town that can submit applications. It is not just nonprofits like Squanicook Greenways or the Townsend Historical Society. Anyone, any group, any individual can submit an application. If you own a house in the historic district and you're not a member of any of these boards and you have some major work to be done, that is something you can submit as an individual to try to get this CPA funding. So that is a very important point. It's open to everyone who's going to do. Of course, it's open to only work that is occurring in Townsend. You cannot have work that occurs outside Townsend. The committee must keep detailed financial records and minutes. And in fact, you'll see later on, I'm going to show you there's a website where you can search every single community preservation grant that's ever been committed by every town, and it's overwhelming. And finally, you can spend up to 5% of the money on administration, which typically means you pay a little bit to some town employee who does the accounting for you. But it's limited to 5% of the total money you bring in. All right, some more legalese, and this is where Cheryl started the group, so I'll try to keep going fast. Some more rules on spending CPA money. So you have three different categories in the CPA. First one is open space and recreation. That's all one category. The second one is historic preservation. And the third one is affordable housing. There is a rule that of the money you bring in, 10% must go into each of those 3 bins. So historic preservation needs to get at least 10%, open space and recreation 10%, affordable housing at least 10%. The CPA committee can then decide, well, that other 70%, do we give ourselves flexibility as to putting it in any bin we want according to what applications we get, or do we hard code it? I will say that most towns make it flexible, so that way they can choose the best grant that they get, no matter what the category, but that's not required. Money cannot be spent on operations, on ongoing expenses. It has to be a one-time project that improves something and only requires money in that year. So you can't pay someone's salary on an ongoing basis or something like that. It has to be a one-time improvement. So let's talk about what needs to be done in order to spend that money. First of all, the CPA committee votes to spend the money, assuming they have enough money, and they must approve the project first. But after they approve it, that's not enough. It then has to go to town meeting, and town meeting must also approve that project. So the money that's being spent by CPA is controlled by both the committee and at town meeting. If there's any money that is not spent by the CPA committee, it does not disappear, it simply continues in one of these 3 buckets or in the flexible bucket. So for example, if affordable housing doesn't have a project that year, the money, at least 10% builds up, if not more, into the affordable housing. And then any money that's, that's not part of that 10% builds up into the general bin. So the money never goes back to the state or anything like that. It stays in Townsend, but it can be put off to the next year, and perhaps that way you can get bigger projects. And finally, no more than 5%, as I mentioned, on administrative costs, accounting and things like that. So one of the other things that we really pushed on CPA, and Kim and I were both on the master plan committee, we saw the CPA as an economic driver in Townsend. So it's very nice to have open space and things like that, but there are also very much a possibility in our town for open space and recreation being a tourist driver. We have a nice rail trail. We're hoping to connect it all the way down to the National River Rail Trail. Should be a very good tourist attraction. From a historic preservation point of view, the Historic Society has this vision of Townsend, Old Harbor Village, thank you. I thought of the name and I couldn't think about it. Of Old Harbor Village, but combining all those buildings in Townsend Harbor into a nice single attraction, you can see that we are being helped enormously by an anonymous gift to improve those buildings, but we have a long-term vision of making sure that 100 years, 200 years from now, those buildings are still standing in an excellent shape, and the Community Preservation Act would help when something significant goes on with one of those buildings to help us keep going with that. This, again, especially with Groton Hill being here, we see as a possible way to bring some of the tourism that's going to Groton Hill, and I'm sure Shirley thinks the same thing, to Townsend and drive our business community. So we do see this as a pro-business proposal. I don't know why we say get. All right, so I've cut off the top part of the title here. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, the question is, the bottom line is how much is this 1% surcharge with the income exemptions going to bring in per year for Townsend? And that's what would have been here if I hadn't cut it off. But my way of calculating is I looked at Pepperell. Pepperell passed it 2 years ago. They have exactly the same 1% and the income extensions and the $100,000 exemption, and they are bringing in about $220,000 per year. I simply looked at the population ratio. The median incomes are quite similar in the two towns. So I'm estimating, and this is just an estimate, $190,000 per year. That includes the state grant, so that's maybe $150,000 of actual taxpayer dollars going in, and then $40,000 from the state. That is a rough estimate. It's not a guaranteed, because one of the variables is how much does the state match that year, and that variable is driven as how active was the housing market, because their match is actually driven by the fees they charge when you sell a house or buy a house. They have they have a fee when you go to the registry of deeds to register your house, and that fee goes to the matching fund. So let's talk about what you can do with the CPA now that we've gone through the boring technical details. So this is a email that I just got from Kim that talked about the most recent Pepperell CPA meeting where they passed their most recent projects. So we're more familiar with Pepperell. We can talk about these projects in particular. Under open space and recreation, they are resurfacing and relining the basketball courts at the town field for 24K that got approved. Under the bin of historic preservation, they have two projects going on at the Lawrence Library, one for the doors and moldings and one for the outer brickwork walls. And they're also, the Community Affordable Housing Trust in their town put in a grant. I don't know exactly what the grant was for, but they got $50K from the affordable housing bin for their community housing application. They spent $2.5K on administrative expenses. And this is just this town meeting. It's not necessarily what they spent all of this year, because they could have done some in the fall, in the spring. I just saw this quickly, and I thought, you know, people know these things, so I'll point it out. If you go back and take a bigger view of the thing, what are some of the things that other towns beside Pepperell has done? So we have quite a long list here, but I'll just briefly go through it. The town of Dunstable bought the Ferrari Farm, which is this beautiful site. I was looking at the pictures of it. I've never actually been to that. They describe it as a keystone parcel containing 5 existing protected areas with a historic house and a barn. The town of Groton put in swimming and boating areas on one of their ponds that really make a very nice swimming area for people in town. The town of Groton also restored some historic wooden structures on the ground of Groton Cemetery. Tingsboro designed and acquired some playground equipment, adult exercise stations, and a dog park. Tingsboro also created 4 affordable housing units recently. If you look at Lake Mosspog, which I'm never sure if I'm saying that right, it is actually a lake in Groton, Dunstable, and Tingsboro, sort of divides between the 3 of them. They have been working on removing invasive weed species, keeping their water quality up. So that counts as open space. Youth soccer fields, they've been spending in Dunstable, improving their youth soccer fields. So there are an enormous number of projects going in those 3 categories: open space and recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing going on. And if you actually want to see any town, what they've done, there is the link there that brings you to the database of all the different projects that have gone on in the past 20 years in this state, with state matching funds helping them out. All right, so this is what I consider the good part. This is why we actually got into it. What kind of things could happen in Townsend? Now, just to point out, this is, you know, no guarantee what the community, if we pass this, what will be the projects? I don't know for certain. These are just projects that people have been suggesting to us, things that are near and dear to my heart, things that are near and dear to other people's hearts that I've talked to. So I'm just going to go through some examples of what are some of the nice things that could happen in this town that would probably not happen without the Community Preservation Act. So near and dear to my heart is extending the rail trail into West Townsend. You know, it's been 2003 I first started working on the rail trail from the center of town down into Groton. One of the things that have taken the longest is raising the 20% match we need. This has been, you know, one of the challenges of selling bricks and stuff like that and keeping things going. When we got into Groton, they have done their 20% match every time with their Community Preservation Act, and it went like that. It was just so much easier to build there. So just to talk about return on investment, if you pay $1 in Townsend, you're going to get a state match of 15 to 35%. Then that number is going to be matched by 4 times for the Mass Trails grant. So you're basically getting $5 of construction for every $1 of taxpayer money we put in for this particular project. But I will say that a lot of the other projects are also the same kind of dynamic, where what we need is a 20% match or a 10% match to get that grant. So this money can really multiply itself. And typically, community preservation committees really like grants where the money that you put in is getting matched or multiplied by other monies. So those kind of projects are favored. So historic preservations. What kind of historic preservation is presently allowed in Townsend? So any building within a historic district is automatically eligible for a community preservation grant. If it's an improvement or something like that. Doesn't mean it's absolutely going to be funded, but it is eligible. Any place that's listed on the State Registry of Historic Places is also eligible. Right now, we do not have a historic commission, but a lot of towns create those. And the really nice thing about a historic commission is they can evaluate homes that are outside the historic district, saying, yes, this home is historic, in which case that home would be allowed to apply for historic preservation. So it might be a really nice thing to do if we do pass the Community Preservation Act, to create a historic commission or to expand the powers of the Historic District Commission to allow them to say this is an historic home based on certain criteria. So some of the other things I've heard about, we all know at the Hart Library, one of the proposals that has gone into that would be opening up an arts and culture center in that kind of thing. There are grants available that I've heard about, all of which require a match. Those matches are very hard to get just from regular town funding, but it would really make this kind of grant much more possible if we have CPA. Creation of a community garden is another project that people have said I might be interested in doing that. That's probably within the range of what you could just do with a CPA grant, although maybe there's other grants that would do matching there too. Youth sports fields. We have on our committee members of the soccer, Townsend Ashby Youth Soccer Association. They are working on different projects. It would help them to have CPA money to help them with their fundraising. They are thinking of additional fields, increased parking, and improved lighting. So just showing you the diversity of things that are possible. This one is near and dear to my heart. This is a Rufus Porter painting in the Reed homestead. It is not the beautiful color mural that's so well preserved upstairs. It's actually the monochrome painting that Rufus Porter did at the same time that's downstairs. Got wallpapered over, ripped up. It's not very visible, but we have had an artist come in and say, this is what really should be there. And with this kind of grant, we could restore this. And, yes, that would also help the town to preserve its historic architecture, but it could also really make the Reed homestead even more of an attraction, bring in tourism, and hopefully increase business for other businesses in town. As far as, different ideas for affordable housing, it's not my expertise, but I was looking at the community preservation site, and they have a lot of towns that have had success working with Habitat with Humanity. In that case, you'd need money matching to bring it in and get Habitat and Humanity projects going. There have been quite a few examples in different towns in Massachusetts where they kicked off this project. And it's also very much a community building project. So I just like that example, so I pushed through with it. Another thing that is possible, there are many grants for buying conservation land, but they all require matches. And it's not just the Conservation Commission that could apply for that. We have a land trust in our area, the North County Land Trust. Obviously, if they want to apply for a community preservation grant, they have to be thinking about a property in Townsend because you can't spend the money outside of Townsend. But, those kind of CPA would help both the Conservation Commission and other organizations that look to preserve land in Townsend. Another one near and dear to my heart, as I mentioned before, Old Harbor Village. This is a Rufus Porter-like painting that renders our vision for the Old Harbor Village, which is the Cooperage, the grist mill, the Reed Homestead, Harbor Church, and the Fire Museum over there. But we would really like to, as I mentioned before, have this as a long-term sustainable business that brings in tourism, but also has some support from the town as to keeping the buildings alive for 10, 20, 100 years. So, in summary, thank you for not falling asleep, for learning the details of the Community Preservation Act in Townsend. And our goal really is to make sure that every voter understands what are the pros and cons. I mean, yes, it's a tax, but 3 of the important pros that we want you to walk away with are this is money that could really make our town a more beautiful place to live in, a more terrific place to live in. This is something that if you are burdened by property taxes, you should be able to get out of. It shouldn't burden you. It should only be the people who can afford to pay who are paying it. And finally, it is bringing in money to Townsend from the state that otherwise goes to other towns. It's, you know, getting Townsend its fair share. Those are the 3 real big pros that I see. So if anybody wants to support us, we ask you to talk to your friends and neighbors, tell them the kind of stuff you learned today, point them to townsendcpa.org. We will be getting yard signs at some point or another, so if you want to sign up for a yard sign in your yard, and then post thoughtful and respectful comments on social media. We try to keep the temperature down, have discussions positive. But no matter your decision, we would like everybody to vote November 5th. And finally, the very important part is a lot of people don't get through all those ballot questions because they are so wordy. So you've got to go all the way to the very end, ballot question number 6, before you get to Community Preservation Act. And we very much hope that you vote yes. So that is the end of my slideshow. Push this here. And thank you very much. So before we get to any questions and answers, I don't know what Brian and Allison would like to add,
Well,
based on their being a year ahead of us, assuming
It
it's
was,
a successful year.
I mean, in Shirley tried to pass the Community Preservation Act, I'm going to say more than a decade ago, and the economy was a little bit different, and they were asking for 3%, and a complete loss. Everybody voted against it. I wasn't living here during that time, but I grew up in Shirley, in the historic district in Shirley Center. The Bull Run is obviously a very historic building I put a lot of restoration into. And finding that balance of restoring something and keeping what's old and beautiful about it while making it have all the right amenities for growth and for new people. And so when I moved back to Shirley about, 6 years ago, it was clear to me that the town was changing. You know, there's a lot of people moving into Shirley. I think our having the commuter rail and a good school system and a lot of open space are very attractive to people. I mean, Brian, you moved to Shirley when? In
2018.
2018. So when the second round for the Community Preservation Act came up, I was very interested in it, and then one day I met this guy who was actually the brains behind the whole campaign. I have to be honest. My role was more getting people there, because I knew a lot more people because he wasn't from Shirley, and because I see a lot of people at the restaurant, so I was able to kind of build some excitement, get some people to come to meetings. And we did multiple meetings, and the genius of the way Brian conducted those meetings was, you know, starting out with what do we all love about Shirley? And there was so much commonalities. People, well, I love the open space. I love the small town feel. I love that there's no line at the post office. I love that it's a good school. I love that I know my neighbors. I love that it's, you know, got the cute little historic districts. And a lot of people I love far and near, and, you know, all the open space. And people, no matter what their background, what their income, what their politics, what any of their differences were, they all love these same things about Shirley. And I would imagine it's the same in Townsend. When I drive through Townsend and see things that I think anybody who was their first time here, they would think, well, this is a cute town. And it is. And this building is, you know, this would be a great building to throw a party in. Have you ever done that? It's beautiful. And so I imagine a lot of people in Townsend feel the same way. And what happens is it's a complex thing to explain. And so people get a little overwhelmed. Well, it sounds like a tax to me. and it's a surcharge. But as you can see, I think the benefits are far outweigh. I mean, the investment is small. It did work out for most people in Shirley to about $43 a year. And for that, you know, the money just comes in. And we are able to do things like, you know, well, you're more up to date on, you're on the actual committee, right?
No.
Or you're part of, you've been to the meetings and you know, to pay attention to the beautiful historic buildings. I don't know if you drive through Shirley Center. Those two white buildings right there where the two commons are in Shirley Center, they're on the cover of every, do you put your gazebo on the homepage of your website and that represents the town of Townsend? Well, imagine if it were falling apart. So our town, is it? I don't know. It was. You know, our historic town hall, which was the cover of everything, completely falling apart and no money put into it. And at one point when the economy was worse, the conversation was, well, why don't we just mothball it? I mean, now instead we've just put on a new roof, we're restoring it, and some of that is coming from grants, some of that is coming from town funding, but a lot of the efforts of things that we're talking about doing are coming from the CPA money, expected return on the CPA. And so people like the historic preservation piece, and then controlling the growth of your community. You know, because we have the, not the rail trail, the railroad, because we have the stop there in Shirley, it's very attractive to a lot of people, and we're also obligated to have a certain amount of affordable housing. That's a law that's been passed, that you have to have a certain amount within walking distance so that people who live there can walk there and take a train to work. And so people were afraid that that's going to turn into huge developments everywhere. The CPA is a way of controlling what the growth looks like in your community. You can set standards. You can say, we don't want, you know, anything higher than this. We want it to blend in with the rest of the historic buildings. You have a lot more control with the CPA. And I'll let Brian talk because he's much more of an expert.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, it's a team effort, and you're all lucky to have the expertise in-house here in terms of how this works. And the challenge, as Allison said, is, well, I assume most folks in the room are here because you think there's something that sounds good here. But how do you get all the other folks on November 6th to come out, get to question number 6, and look at it and say, I don't know what this means, but someone said I'm supposed to vote yes, and that sounds good. I mean, getting out the vote, I think that's what we found in Shirley was the hard thing. The way we would do it was to talk to someone and say, oh, boy, I'm new to town. You've been here a while. What do you love about Shirley? And like Allison said, they'd go off and tell me some story. And I'd say, you know, we've got an opportunity to invest in Shirley because you were talking about that park downtown that's a little bit overrun. There's an opportunity to invest in Shirley. It's a ballot measure. Oh, really? Well, how much does it cost? About 1 or 2 cups of coffee a month. Oh, that sounds great. That's an investment in Shirley? Absolutely. Make sure you vote yes. And we had those conversations over and over and over. And that's how people understood what this all is about. And when the voting came, we had 3 out of 4 voters who showed up, voted yes. And I think it blew us away.
It did. It was the biggest, it was the most successful vote in quite a long time.
It's very rare in these divided times to have 3 out of 4 voters all agreeing on one thing. So the reason we're very excited, or I'm very excited to come here, is because we've seen how just those conversations can get people focused on something that probably most people in Townsend do agree with, is all these beautiful images. Most people say, yeah, I want to invest in that in our town. So that's what ties all of us together, is these possibilities. And the way to get there is to simply raise awareness so people know to vote yes. And I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I think that's what we found in Shirley. There are some tricks to that, which is that it's really easy for people to say on Facebook, oh, no, this is a tax, and it's $40 a month. We can't afford that. And so it took some of us, I'm not on Facebook, But it took some of us to be very vigilant and correct any misinformation politely, but with facts. And we were very proactive. And as we did that, people kind of backed off. And there wasn't really an opposition because people realized it's actually not a lot of money when we talk about the return. So I think there's just something, the investment in Townsend as a messaging is what we found a lot of success with in Shirley. And for folks who own a house here, you're already invested here. So here's a chance to grow that investment. So maybe I'll leave it there in case there are any questions that people have. And in terms of just where we are in Shirley, it takes a while. Our committee is still, they've gotten set up, and they're now working through a process of getting organized. But we have aligned our open space planning process with the committee's goals. So I'll just leave it there. I'll hand back to Allison.
One other thing that I think is really important that happened that's a silver lining. To me, a big part of this whole campaign was, yes, passing the CPA, but I felt really strongly because, for example, I'm on the Center Town Hall Committee, and I volunteered at the Historic Museum. And what I found was, since moving back, and you know, I'm older now, and I found that the people that were doing the volunteering, going to the meetings, doing a lot of stuff in Shirley were older, and that what we need is to get that a younger generation. And so I was so happy when I met Brian, and he's got a whole network of friends that are his age that have kids in the public school system. They're invested in the town because they're raising children here. And you know, to get that next wave of people involved, and this was a really great campaign to get them involved in because they had moved here and bought property here and thought, well, yeah, I want these things to be, you know, to go well. And they're the people that are putting on the Pumpkin Fest and the, you know, whatever events, the Holdenwood Trail Run, and all the stuff that happens is not people my age. You know, we did it. And we did it for a long time. And now this is the generation doing that. And I just think that that was a really beneficial thing that came out of it. So you're just putting out signs now, or you have signs out in town? Because that was, I think, one thing that also was very beneficial is that we plastered the town with signs. Everybody, we got everybody to take them, and I think there is a sort of a, you know, this tide of people go, oh, this seems really popular, everybody wants this, you know, and that can influence people. And, you know, if they see all their neighbors are for it, that's a very positive thing. So as many signs as you can get out there in the next 2 weeks or whatever it is until November 5th, and try to do that. Get everybody to take them.
And, you know, for the younger, I assume Townsend has similar demographics to Shirley, where there's a cohort of younger families who are running around like me, running in late because I'm coming from soccer practice. And those are the folks on November 6th, you're with a presidential election. So I imagine most folks will probably be going to the polls anyway, or perhaps voting in advance. So our challenge, it was an off-year election. We had to get people to go to the polls. You have an opportunity here where people are going to the polls probably, but who's paying attention to item number 6? And so the more folks of the younger generation who probably have no clue about item number 6, that's where the key messaging is. And I think that's a real opportunity, because once those folks hear about it, they say, of course, I'm invested, I bought a house, and thanks for telling me. This is a no-brainer.
And there's a lot of towns around here that you can point to, right? Groton has been Groton voted to increase the percentage that they contribute because it was so successful. Pepperell is doing well with it. I mean, and I liked what you had in here, Bill, where it said, if we're not voting for it, then there's money sitting on the table that's going to other communities. You know, it's there for the taking for a pretty reasonable investment.
Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Did you have anything you want to say, Kim, or should we just go right to questions?
Well, I think to add, Bill, to what you said, there's the tools, and you mentioned them a little bit, the master plan and the open space plan. We did a survey as part of the master planning committee, and one of the things in there, 70% of our townspeople did want to extend the rail trail to West Townsend. There's things that people wanted to see, things that were important to them. So the committee that gets stood up has tools that they can use to help them evaluate the grants. And the possibilities that are there are really endless. And I think that's one of the misconceptions that people have is like, what is this about? What can get funded? The depth and breadth of it is really important for people to understand, because there's some really clever programs out there around affordable housing where they've given stipends so that people put a lock, if you will, on their house that it has to go to people that are in the 80th percentile, so that it's going to someone that wouldn't be able to afford a property otherwise. So there's good ways that we can meet those demands that the state puts on us to have the affordable housing, to make it so that young families can stay in town. Give myself for an example. I don't have children, so is there any benefit to me to someone selling my house after I die for an astronomical sum? Probably not. I could put it into a program with stipends, and just reading about what the other towns have done is really interesting, and they've done some clever programs. So I think that's really important for us to look to the future. Does it happen year 1 or year 2? No. But then some of the other things around community blight, if there's a building that looks out of shape, that affects the community and the property values. If we can keep things up at our historic properties, that helps our community property values. And I think threading the things together and the ability to use those matching funds is really important. With the small towns group, there's actually a program in the state that we got locked out of because we didn't spend that type of money before. We didn't have access to that type of money, but community preservation opens that door to tourism money that we're not getting here. And there's a lot of different examples of how rail trails can connect to businesses. If you look where our trail ends, there's businesses there. People can come off the trail. We've had Karen come in a few years ago. We were looking at the electric charging stations to put those on town property. That's something you can get for free, and so you advertise that at a trailhead, where then you can do an investment for betterment for kayaks or canoes or bicycles, and it ties it together. And we can't undervalue what Groton has with Groton Hill and the people that are coming in looking for things to do. And so our old Harbor Village is something for them to do. And as we start to place this on a map for our whole region, that's when the people come, right? If you're just an hour from Boston, you can go hike and you can go to a great store in our common, and you can go right over the line to Barn Door. You can get an ice cream, you can get soup, you can get all these things right on the trail. If we tell it to people, I think they'll come. So the economic impact, I think, is really important. And even the community garden piece. We were approached at TEO to do a community garden. And when you look at, one, the connectivity for community that you can have with a community garden, mental health for folks that might be shut in, that might not have land of their own, and the return on the food that you can get from a community garden to feed people. Those are all little things. And the other thing I wanted to say that is a little bit separate from community preservation is that if folks feel like they're struggling and can't pay their taxes, look at the programs, as Bill mentioned, that are already existing, and please call TEO. We can help with food, and we can help with the purple bags, things of that nature, because we want people in our community to thrive. We don't want you to just survive, so we're here for that. So those are just some things I wanted to add, Bill.
Great, thank you, Kim. So now we're going to open up the floor to questions. Do we have a mic available? Okay, so Rick has a mic there. Anybody have a question?
Yeah.
Yard sign up is in the back.
No.
You have a comment? Go ahead. Comment we'll take.
Sold.
Okay, that's it. A short one. We got
Need any other help during the election time for volunteers?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Jock?
Do you need additional volunteers around the election time?
So we will, that is a good suggestion. We are going to be holding signs on November 5th outside of Memorial Hall somewhere or another. So I'll be posting on Facebook about it if you want to do that. I will be posting, as soon as Dave has a YouTube video, I'm going to be posting this on Facebook and on our website. And I'll also be asking people to sign up for signs, besides just the people we contact directly. So really it's signs and holding signs on actual election day. And of course you want to make sure that if you hold a sign, people may come up and ask you questions, so you have to know what it is you're talking about. So, but yeah, those are the really two opportunities. But go ahead.
Some of the things that we did is we had the signs, and we made a huge effort to get those everywhere. We did a mailing. I don't remember where we got them. We did 2 mailings. Forget how we paid for that, but probably out of pocket. And we mailed to every resident. We had a Facebook page. We had a website. We had a calculator on the website where you could put in the value of your house and see what you would need to pay. And we had a series of meetings with people and targeted groups. We knew that seniors, for example, very nervous about any addition to what they pay. So we went to the Shirley Senior Center, and 2 of us, and Paul Prisbilla was there, and we just talked about what the benefits were and how we saw it, quite honestly. And it's an investment for the future and the young families coming up. And then we had a meeting, same thing. We'd have a little gathering with people that all have kids in school. Picking groups of people who, and then appealing to them for what they're interested in. For the seniors, it's not going to cost you that much, or I'm probably not going to cost you anything, because you can opt out. And then for the people with families, this can help with, a million things that they'd be interested in.
To reach some of the younger voters in town, my wife managed a Facebook site, and every day she would post a new example of a project. Oh, look what Groton recently did from CPA. Or, did you know CPA funds can be used this way? So every day from sort of now till election day, the 5-6 weeks, there was a new post popping up. Yep. And so people who were following Facebook, I don't, but people who were getting these messages, and we were starting to appeal to different people. We would appeal to veterans and talk through some of the things that were supportive of veterans organizations and veterans activities. We'd speak to open space people, but we were speaking to them through these Facebook posts just on our Facebook page. And that started getting lots of likes, and then other people were learning about it that way. So again, it didn't reach the people like me and others who aren't on Facebook, but a lot of people who are running around shuttling kids left and right, they're the ones who are on Facebook who learned a lot about the CPA, because we were very fact-based. We didn't say, oh, you gotta vote, it's such a good idea. We said, well, you decide, but look what this town did with their funds. Mm-hmm. And people made their own decisions, but that helped to get the word out.
Yep.
And the signs, we started, I remember, it was right at the end of September. We must have put out 150 signs.
They were everywhere.
We got them everywhere. People couldn't miss them, and then people wondered what it was about.
Yeah, the sooner they get out, the better.
So we did a town mailing already. What made you choose to do 2? Because they're not cheap.
No, they're not.
We did a second one very close to the election, and we had a little bit of money left in our pot, and we said, let's just go for it. We have no regrets.
Yeah.
But glad you got one out.
Yep. And we have our senior center meeting is scheduled for next Wednesday.
Great.
Kim has been saying, oh, let's post individual projects afterwards. So
Yes.
that's an interesting idea.
I said I was never being on Facebook, and during our master plan committee, I would not be on Facebook, and this project made me go on Facebook. So that's how important it is. There's so many benefits to our community that we can just really change. I think we just have to have that vision and believe, and if someone's struggling, there are programs to help, but if someone can't help, I hope that they can. And like Bill said, even if you do have a no vote, we do want everyone to go out and vote in this national election that is coming up on November 5th. But the ability for us to transform our community is only limited by our imagination. And when you look through the 40,000 different projects which I do, it's really amazing what these communities have come up with and what they've done. And these incremental changes can just help transform what a community looks like. So hopefully we'll have the same success as you did in Shirley.
So Brian, are you and your wife available for hire?
We're happy to consult.
Yes, Jock.
Did Shirley use
Wait for the
multiple- Did Shirley use multiple social media platforms, or did you just use Facebook?
So we formed essentially a political advocacy organization, Yes for CPA in Shirley or something. We created a website for that organization for the folks who just wanted a website to go to. And then we also created a Facebook page and had those two platforms online. And we figured that would reach most people. Someone created an Instagram page because certain people use Instagram, but I think Facebook seemed to be the primary channel.
There's no newspaper in Shirley anymore, even online. So really that you have to reach people online. There's no, or mail them. The newspaper, whatever it is, the Neshoba Valley Voice, they did do a story on it, and then they did a story when it was successful, when we won. But we used to have 2 newspapers in Shirley. We don't have any.
Yeah, we had 3, we're at 0.
I know.
So-
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's hard to get a message out cohesively because it's really hard to know where people are looking for information.
And we also use some email lists as well. If there were appropriate email lists, we communicated to people with emails about reminders.
And we got people offering to volunteer. We also flushed out the crazies. There were some crazy people who were very upset about it, but I think that's how they would be anyway.
And I'm so envious of your rail trail, so I
know.
think I'm going to figure out how to buy a brick, and I really hope this passes in Townsend.
But just to give you a historic the original name of our railroad was the Peterborough-Shirley Railroad.
Oh, really?
And
That's interesting.
it is literally on the other side of the Squanicook River. You could see Shirley for about once we get down that far, but you'll see Shirley the
Connect
whole way,
everything.
but you will not be in Shirley. So it was so close, but not there. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And if you would like a yard sign, just please sign up on our sheets in the back. And there's also, if you want a little folder that our classic one-page handout. Did you want to say something, Cheryl? Oh, the signs? The signs are coming on Friday. Yay! Thanks, everybody. And thanks to TCAM for their excellent service and dealing with my 3 computers it took for me to get it going. Thanks, Dave and guys.